I'm Dr. Sonia Mather. I'm a family physician and someone who's been living with Parkinson's disease for over 22 years. I also have the privilege of being a member of the Davis-Phinney Foundation Board of Directors and the Brian Grant Foundation Medical Advisory Council. And I have the distinct pleasure of sitting down with two of my favorite people, Davis Phinney and Mr. Brian Grant. You know, there are a few blessings that come with this life experience, and one that I recognize for sure is the friendships that you develop with people that you wouldn't normally cross paths with. And I'm really grateful for those opportunities. I think if it wasn't for that, we would not likely be sitting here today. So hello to you both and big hugs.
Hey,
Hello to you.
always a pleasure to see you, Sonia.
Yeah.
You know, as I look around the screen, too bad it wasn't around the room if we couldn't be there in person, but I think the three of us kind of are a prime example that this disease really knows no boundaries when it comes to age or race, ethnicity, gender, or nationality. And we all sort of represent that heterogeneity or spectrum of disease where everyone with PD really is unique in terms of their symptoms, course of disease, prognosis, and treatment response. And I think people listening would be very interested in hearing your stories, your sort of diagnosis stories. We all have them. So maybe, Davis, could you start us off and tell us when and how your diagnosis came about?
Yes. I mean, I was diagnosed around 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so I've been living with this disease for close to 30 because I can trace my symptoms back even that much farther. But my diagnosis was difficult to be made because at the time there just was not young athletic type of people like myself who were really being diagnosed with PD. And so everyone looked at me and they said, well, I mean, he sort of presents like he has Parkinson's, but that couldn't be possible. And so it took me a while, and I went through the whole spectrum of medical professions, basically seeking an answer before someone just gave me some Cinemat and said, why don't you try this and see how it works. And it was like, oh, yeah, relief. But so, and then subsequently, we ended up moving to Italy, of all places, because I felt like I was under such a microscope of being looked at as a guy with a disease, and everyone in Boulder, or everyone seemingly was kind of giving me odd bits of advice and whatnot. And so I just felt like I really wanted to escape and find a place where no one knew me or knew of my backstory and just accepted me. And that worked out because as I said, we moved to Italy, of all places, and so that was where I was able to come to terms with my diagnosis.
Right. Someone actually sent in a question ahead of time, and they were wondering if you noticed, did you notice your symptoms first when it came to it affecting your cycling? Was that how you sort of first noticed that there were some physical changes that were occurring, or how did you first notice?
Well, now that I understand the symptoms more, I was more struggling with my left foot, which was cramping continuously when I would go out for a run. Mm. And so it was less of a problem cycling, but it was definitely a problem that was coming on when I would exercise. Right. And then eventually my little finger started to twitch, and that was sort of what inspired me to go to stop looking for a physical therapist type solution and look at neurological solutions.
Right. I mean, it's interesting. It's unfortunate, but the story you tell about people not knowing what was going on and thinking you were too young for it to be Parkinson's disease and not entering their headspace is actually, unfortunately, same story that a lot of people that are more recently diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's disease face as well. Not that much has changed, unfortunately, over the years. Brian, how was that with you when you were diagnosed?
Let me back up a few years prior to being diagnosed. When I was traded to LA from Miami in 2004, 2005, or 2005, 2004, 2005. I noticed that my game was really starting to decline, but in this league of a professional athlete, you just see that with people. So I didn't think anything of it until I actually got to Phoenix. When I arrived in Phoenix, I started to notice that I couldn't jump off my left leg as easily as I used to be able to. It was very awkward. And I actually saw a neurologist while I was there because I had a small skin twitch in my skin. I mean, it wasn't even noticeable. And I asked what it was, and I was told that, after having a long career that I had and being banged up as much as I was, you're going to have little things like that happen. So I didn't think anything of it. I thought that, it was nothing to worry about. I had spoken to a player I used to play against who was retired, who was talking to me about depression for athletes because, we're retiring very young from something that we've done our whole lives. And so when I was diagnosed with depression after going through 6 months of denying myself that there's no way I could have depression, I thought that depression was for weak-minded individuals, but I was so wrong. I was so wrong. After I came out of that, I had the finger twitch, just like Davis, and moved back to Portland. And then I was diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's at OHSU by Dr. Nutt. And at the time, I was going through so many other personal things that I made a joke about the scale in his office because I had put on a little bit of weight. And so we both laughed, and then I went home, and 2 weeks later it hit me that I had this disease, and I got scared because I didn't know if that meant that I needed to sit my kids down and tell them, Dad might not be here next year. Or was it was there a surgery or anything? But I want to say this, if it wasn't for people like Davis, Michael J. Fox, and Muhammad Ali, then I would have been lost. I mean, I probably would have hid with the disease rather than stepping out with it, trying to help people. So, Davis, you were helping people like me, for a while. And I'm really grateful for that. And I know there are a lot of people out there that are grateful for you and Michael and Muhammad. And to answer, I don't know if you asked the question, but it was other Parkinson's patients that I got to meet that really also changed my life because I got it from their perspective, and I started to learn about medications and the effects that it was having on different people. And, neurologists are good at their jobs, but they're not very good at answering those kind of hard questions that you can ask somebody in your group. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can all identify with, when you talked about Davis and Muhammad Ali and Michael J. Fox, that we all have to kind of stand on the shoulders of the giants that came before us. And it really, I think the impact that they have and have had on our entire Parkinson's community, and now you as well, Brian, I count among that, is really, it's really underrepresented. I don't think we recognize it as much as we should. Davis, did you find the same thing that you learned from your peers more so than the neurologist you may have saw at the time in terms of the practical side of things?
Well, that's an interesting question because I definitely was learning from my peers, but I was also stubborn as an athlete and as a longtime athlete. I felt like I was smarter than the disease and I could figure out some workaround with it. But that proved ultimately not correct. And so became somewhat of my own worst enemy. And in that I was actually not doing myself any favors by not taking my meds correctly and 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 feeling like, well, I can beat this thing. And I was just so stubborn about it. But finally, I found my neurologist, Helen Bronte Stewart, in Stanford. And she was just the right person with the right vibe who came from an athletic background. She was a ballerina. And so that sort of got me straight and thinking about doing things more correctly.
Right. I mean, that kind of stems to acceptance. And I would imagine that coming from such a physically demanding profession where you both are so in tune with your body and what you can do, how did you, I guess, how did you come to that point of acceptance that with this disease, something's really with your body maybe beyond your control? Was it a difficult process or concept to come to terms with? Davis, start maybe.
Well, you're assuming that I'm totally accepting of this disease. And I would say that even now, 20 years post-diagnosis, I still ebb and flow with acceptance. But that doesn't mean that I can't focus on living well and doing my best, making my best effort to enjoy my life. But yeah, the acceptance is, I think, something that even as I say now, I still struggle with completely accepting this disease.
Oh, I mean, I agree. I think that acceptance can be really hard to reach sometimes. I mean, I found it took me probably nearly a decade to actually accept my diagnosis, not intellectually. Intellectually, I knew I had Parkinson's, but emotionally. But once you reach that type of acceptance, you can at least start to move beyond your diagnosis to sort of take control of certain variables, to begin to optimize your life. How long, Brian, did it take you to reach that level of acceptance? Maybe not full. And sort of when did you decide to begin to sort of prioritize living well with this disease?
Well, see, I was diagnosed. Once I was diagnosed and I knew what it was, I knew what was going on with my body. I had turned down so many opportunities to try out for broadcasting and things like that, things I always saw myself doing after the ball stopped bouncing for me. So I kind of hid with it. It didn't take me long to accept it enough to come out with it. I thought that would take longer, but like I said, I saw the people who were on the forefront of Parkinson's and they gave me courage to step out and let the world know that I had Parkinson's. As far as totally accepting it, I'm with Davis on that. I mean, it's still an ongoing process, especially with the playoffs on right now. I sit back and I watch NBA games. That's probably why I don't watch them that much anymore, but I have to watch the playoffs because they're so good. But when I see that, it kind of kicks me back a little bit because, I'm reliving in my mind when I used to be in what I thought was control of my body. And now I've lost a lot of that. And it really messes with the accepting process, especially emotionally. I think physically, Parkinson's takes that away each and every year. Something new comes up But I think I've kind of accepted that that's going to happen in my life. But the emotional side for me is tough.
Yeah, I can totally relate to you, Brian, on that front, because I mean, I had that same role after I finished cycling. I was a television commentator for bike racing, and that fairly quickly just went right away. And so even now, I mean, in my head, I'll watch bike races and I'll make this comment or that comment. But then when I speak it out loud, it comes out sounding like mush. And so there's, you just recognize that there's no way you can work in the way that you used to, or that I can anyway. But that being said, what's so wonderful about having our conversation here today is that we've got three great spokespeople and ambassadors for the sport, or for the disease, Parkinson's, and that's a really powerful thing. I think that for us to be able to reach out to people and not be so self-conscious that we would not do this, I think is wonderful. So thank you both.
Thank you, Davis.
Thank you, Davis.
And you touched on one thing. I mean, we don't have control over the diagnosis. We don't have control over how it affects our lives. I mean, I see a medical show, or I see my husband leaving for work, and I get still that little ping of, oh gosh, I wish I was doing medicine again as well. But one uniting goal, I think, that defines both of your foundation is your mission to improve quality of life for people living with the challenges that this disease presents on a daily basis. Because truthfully, until that cure comes about, it's all about quality of life. And what those quality of life goals are will vary from person to person. For some, it may be running a marathon. For others, it may be just getting to the end of the driveway so that they can check the mail. I mean, both are very important for the person who's defining them. So what are your quality of life goals, I wonder? Brian?
Oh, to try to live as normal life as I possibly can. I want to be there for my kids. I want to see my daughters down the aisle, and my goal is to be able to walk them down the aisle versus me someone have to wheelchair me down the aisle to give them away. I know that, Davis, this may happen to you sometimes too. Sometimes my meds work so well and I go a little extra longer without any symptoms, and I start to trick myself into thinking that I don't have it. It happened more often in the beginning than it does now, but it still does. And that's kind of a road that I need to stop going down, because it's kind of like putting your hand over a lighter and not thinking you're going to get burnt, and you get burnt. But my biggest concern are my kids, and being able to walk my daughters down the aisle and being able to be there and watch them grow and being a grandpa, and just everything that any normal person would want.
Those are great goals.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I feel like, Brian, what you described was my experience when I was pre-DBS and I was on Cinemat, where I would get to that place with your Cinemat dose where everything is just like,
yeah,
oh yeah, this is it. I don't actually have this disease. That's all BS. And then, of course, within a few minutes of overdoing my dose, or else not taking it on time, then I start swimming around and struggling. But I feel like, to answer your question, Sonia, for me living well is about enjoying as many moments in any given day that are not dominated by Parkinson. And so I think that comes with a certain level of mindfulness, where I'm focused on positive outcomes and just enjoying whatever I'm doing. And when it comes to my symptoms, I tend to tackle them one at a time and say, okay, so my sleeping is gone to pot. What can I do to help my sleep? And then I'll just go about finding ways to improve that symptom, and then I'll move on to something else. But it's, this disease, as we all know, is no picnic. And so it's just a matter of defining whatever makes you happy in the day, and hopefully that happiness also translates to you making a habit of doing something that's beneficial for your health and beneficial for your Parkinson's disease.
Those are wise words, very wise
Very
words.
wise.
Yeah. Actually, since you brought up health, during our conversation last week, we were chatting about exercise, and it was so interesting to me anyway, how you both approach it differently. It's sort of very much in line with the way you must have trained your professional athletic careers, them having the differences that they do. So what have some of the challenges been for you in sort of incorporating the way you used to train and what you need to do for your Parkinson's disease? Brian, do you take that one?
Yeah. Discipline. For me, it's been discipline. I have to learn I've been learning anew, but I have to learn a new level of discipline that says, Brian, you're not the athlete you used to be. You can't train like you used to train. In basketball, it's a lot of stop and go, quick spurts, and that takes a certain kind of training to have that anaerobic shape to be able to get through an 82 game season. And now with Parkinson's, I can't train that way. And I think it's like I was telling you, Davis, I'll go like a month of just a little bit at a time, but then my mind starts to tell me, what are we doing? You're not going to lose weight, or you're not going to feel better if you don't ratchet it up. Let's go, get it going. And I do, and boom, I pull something, or I strain something. Or it does the opposite. It ends up making my tremor that much worse, or heavier rigidity. So for me, it's just being able to find or be disciplined to know that, first of all, I'm not a professional athlete. I'm a retired professional athlete. I used to play basketball. Now I'm in the game of life going up against Parkinson's, and that's a whole different foe and a whole different approach. And, Davis, you gave me some good advice in our last conversation, and I'm just trying to apply that to everyday living, just to do a little bit each and every day. I don't have to get it all back in 1 week, even though in my mind, it's like, I think I can. Even if I could, it's not going to come back the way it used to, because I'll be 50 next year. I don't have all those, hormones in my body that allow me to shred up. So the discipline aspect of it for me has been tough, but it's ongoing, and it's a work in progress.
Well, that's great to hear, Brian, that you're trying to get that consistency, because for me, unlike Brian, my whole thing was consistent training, day in and day out, year in and year out. And so I've been able to translate that to more of a Parkinson's friendly activity level. But it's that daily thing that I, for the most part, look forward to, which sustains me. And that's been really helpful. But what's funny is people, even today, people who know me, know of my disease and whatnot, will still come up to me and they go, dude, you look so fit, you must be ready to race. And I'm like, yeah, not even remotely close. But I guess I should take it as a compliment.
Yes, you should. A couple of viewers also asked questions specifically about exercise. They sort of self-proclaimed couch potatoes that really haven't started exercising, and they hear all about, exercise being the one thing that we can do as patients to help ourselves in terms of our symptoms and the way we feel on a daily basis and what we can accomplish. So what would both of you advise someone who's just been diagnosed, maybe a little bit older, has never really taken exercise to be part of their daily life? How should they get started, or what would your words of advice be? Davis, do you want to start?
Yes, I would say that it's just about creating a habit, finding something that you enjoy enough that you'll do it on a daily basis and start there. And with the philosophy that something is always better than nothing. And so it doesn't have to be one thing. It could be 5 different things. But of those things, I feel like what's important is that you get outside if possible and walk if that's all that you can do, and go from there. And maybe you get up to bike riding, maybe you don't. But then there's a myriad of classes available for our community, which if you're the kind of person who needs to hold yourself accountable because of a friend who's nagging you, going, come on, man, let's go do this dance class, then there's that available. And one thing that's really changed with this pandemic is the availability of classes online. And so you don't have to have like necessarily a pedaling for Parkinson's group, say, activity in your own hometown. You can just dial one up on the internet, and it's sort of like Peloton, but it's Peloton for Parkinson's.
That's great. And you're absolutely right. I mean, the pandemic has had a lot of challenges, but some great things have come out of it, if one can say anything great came out of the pandemic. But one of those is the online availability for people. There's not much of an excuse and I know it's on both of your foundation sites, that there's some great exercise opportunities available. So Brian, what would your advice be?
Same as Davis. Find something you like to do. Because ultimately what we're talking about is people continuing to keep it moving. So many people that I meet with this disease are sitting back waiting for that cure, thinking that, the cure is just right around the corner, and it may be, but in the meantime, you got to get up and move. I've been guilty of that. I'm a world-class athlete, was a world-class athlete, and I sometimes give into depression and get lazy. During the pandemic, that wasn't my best moment as far as exercising and things like that. I kind of gave into the dreariness of the pandemic, being with my kids, dealing with depression. So it happens to everybody. It doesn't matter if you're a world-class athlete or not, but the thing we're trying to say is do something. It's better to do something that you like, something that'll keep bringing you back. But even if you do some things you don't like, just keep moving. Because for me, when I quit moving, I tell you what, it was like planting a garden. All these new weeds just started sprouting up. Like, damn, when did that happen? When, I'm having a lot more trouble swallowing, and oh my God, I'm constipated. Just
Yeah.
things went haywire. And so once I got back into a little rhythm and started moving, it didn't take everything away, but I felt much better and I could deal with those things. So just movement.
Right. And what Brian talks about with apathy is so common with our community. Is people just letting themselves go because they just don't have the will to struggle against the disease. But Brian, you said that very well about people needing to just get moving, because if you don't move, then you stop. And that sort of inertia becomes harder and harder to fight.
Yeah, absolutely. Two things came to mind as you were both speaking. One is the depression issue that Brian, you mentioned a couple of times. And that is something that I want those listeners to know is something that's very common in our community. Even before the motor symptoms start, you can get depression, as you were describing before. And sometimes people might call themselves depressed, but it's mainly apathy. And that sometimes you can sort of, work on through accountability and positive thoughts and optimism. But sometimes people get real depression, and that really requires medical intervention. So people should never feel hesitant to seek medical attention to see if their depression is really something that needs to be taken care of with either medication or counseling or a combination of both. The other thing that you mentioned, Brian, which I think is really important, is that you can't be a passive bystander in this disease. You have to take an active role, like you were saying. You can't just wait around for the cure. It's something that you have to do actively. And when we look at the Parkinson's landscape, ending Parkinson's is obviously the end game, but we really need to approach that end goal in two parallel tracks. And one is that much needed research into better therapies and a cure, which is also important, but in many ways as equally important as optimizing quality of life while we wait for those treatments. And both of your foundations sort of focus mostly on that track, living well with Parkinson's disease. So what motivated each of you to take on that work? What made you sort of decide to start a foundation to do that? Davis, I guess you first, because it's a little bit, you've been around a little bit longer with your foundation.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a broken record with the people being passed. But what happened with me was fairly early on. When I was diagnosed, I would run into people with Parkinson's, and they would just tell me that, they were just waiting for someone to cure their disease. And I recognized that by them waiting, that was too passive of a response. And with passivity comes more decline. And so I felt like if maybe the best thing I could do was use my voice not in the curative sense of finding an overall cure, but in the curative sense of helping people just feel better right now. And so that's where our foundation seeds were started.
Brian?
I was pretty lost once I was diagnosed, but I knew I wanted to do something. So we ended up having our first gala, which was a huge success. It brought a lot of people out, but we just didn't have, I didn't have the vision to give to my executive director and say, okay, this is what we want to do. I knew I wanted to help people. We went through several different ideals, a website that's supposed to do all this great stuff and, you know, kind of looking to see what everybody else was doing. But things really came together, I think, when I met Katrina Call. I met you and Aaron at our events. And I kind of just relate to Katrina. I just want to help people. She said, well, what are you best at? And I said, what do you mean? She goes, well, I mean, exercise, nutrition, you're a world-class athlete. Let's get it together. And so that was kind of how we were already thinking nutrition and exercise prior to Katrina getting there. But once she got there, she picked it up and really moved it forward, you know, getting advisory boards put together, just getting all the information that we were going to need to be able to create the foundation that we have now. And I think with people like you, Davis, who were at the forefront of things, you know, you kind of made it easier for us to kind of slide into that niche with you to be able to help the people in the same way that you were doing it.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like one of the best things that we can do, Brian, is get other learned people together and dispense information, even beyond exercise and beyond diet, and go into the whole medicine question and attitude and et cetera, et cetera. There's other ways with which you can find joy in your life. And so the more that we can dispense a broad variety of information, the better that our community will be.
That's great. I mean, Davis, you're talking about sort of future directions, and is there anything in particular that you find exciting about where the foundation, Davis Phinney Foundation, is heading? Any projects in particular you're excited about?
Well, one thing, again, to go back to this pandemic, is that we've always done large in-person events called Victory Summits, which people have gotten quite a bit of inspiration and information from. But having to take all those online was not necessarily a bad thing, because we were able to do more than just reach the people who would come to our room. And so in that way, that's been a good thing. But then looking forward to the future, I feel like the more that we can expand our message out to the community, and certainly there's an underserved part of our community. And so we're trying a new program that helps local places, whether it's Portland and Brian Grant stomping ground, or Boulder, which is my stomping ground, or Tulsa, Oklahoma, or wherever. We're looking at creating initiatives for smaller communities to come together and helping with that. I'm sorry, I can't speak that well.
No, David, you're
Fine,
absolutely
Davis.
right. You're doing great.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, that I've been to the Victory Summits, and And they're amazing places. The mood and the optimism and the inspiration that people get from attending those are really phenomenal. And to be able to offer that same sort of content to a larger audience through online offerings is really tremendous and can help a lot of people that you wouldn't normally reach. So that's great. And Brian, what about you? Is there anything you're excited about that the foundation is planning down the road?
Yeah, we have an exercise conference coming up a week from Saturday, which is going to be huge for us. When we first started in exercise, we thought, okay, let's start boot camps locally at the YMCA, and we had some really good connections, but we weren't able to get the information out there enough to fill those classes. And so Katrina came up with, rather than trying to build these classes, let's build a curriculum that we can put trainers through. And so we're basically training the trainer. And when I say trainers, I'm not just talking about, just a physical lifting trainer, but an MMA coach, boxing, whoever uses exercise, which is everybody, in their training methods can become certified, Parkinson certified. And through that certificate, you can basically say, if I come to your MMA gym, I'm like, I have Parkinson's, that's all right, I'm Parkinson certified. So that was one of the bigger things that we did that I think has been very well received within the Parkinson's community. We're doing, like David said, through Zoom and the internet, thanks to the pandemic, we've put together mental health webinars. We've done kids, parents with Parkinson's, which your daughter participated in, and my two sons. So, there's a lot of things that we have in the works coming up, but I think the most important thing is what's happening here right now, because, there's two people from two organizations that kind of do similar things who are actually communicating, and we're saying, I like what you do, you like what we do. Let's get together and put the information out there together, because not only in the Parkinson's community, but anything, cancer, any disease, any organization that's created to help in that fight, a lot of times it's hard to get people together. It is, because you're dealing with donations and dollars for your programs and things like that. But I think this is a great start, what we're doing right now. And I hope to see more of it with other organizations, definitely, and what you're doing, Davis.
Yeah.
Sometimes I ramble on. Sorry, folks.
No.
I'm on here with Davis Phinney. Come on.
No,
My man.
Brian, you sound so much better than me. I'm sitting here thinking I should just shut up and let Brian.
Please.
No, both your voices are so important. And something that, we've talked about this when it comes to the PD Avengers, that whole collaboration, that together we can put an end to Parkinson's, that we can get it done
Absolutely.
Together. Because working in silos and duplication of efforts, it's not only a waste of resources, but it's most importantly a waste of time. And that's something that none of us here on the call today or in our audience or the wider community, we don't have that time to waste. So that's really great advice for other organizations. Brian, did you want to add to that at all, Davis, about collaboration between different organizations and how that can work?
Well, I feel like Brian and I have such a good communication level already that this is a natural fit for us to do something of value to the community. And what that is, I think we'll probably leave it to our executive directors, Polly Dawkins in my case, and Katrina in yours, Brian. But that collaboration is so important because it allows for us to not view ourselves as competing for resources, but because I think for both of us, we feel like if we can help the Parkinson's community most directly to feel better and function better, then that's what we're going to do. And so yes,
Yeah.
collaboration is key.
It is, and I'm sorry to say, but I'm hoping you both get out of business fairly quickly. There's no need to have a Davis Phinney Foundation for Parkinson's, at least, or a Brian Grant Foundation that we can all sort of celebrate over a drink when that comes to be. And Polly and Katrina are such remarkable people. I think they'll definitely try and help make that happen for sure.
Sonia, you started the PD Avengers, so you're familiar with having a foundation yourself. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, Davis. PD Avengers is basically a group of global advocates who are unifying the voices in the Parkinson's community to basically end Parkinson's disease. So just a little bit of a mission. But we hope to work with other organizations like yours and Brian's to help people not to work in silos, so that we can have a united voice, that we can add urgency to the cause of Parkinson's disease. And we're working under 3 pillars. One is advocacy, making policy changes. The other is equity in care, because we believe that globally people deserve equity in care, including basic access to medications. And third, patient voice in research, because really the patient voice is important in research, from the ideas that are generated to actually planning the clinical trials to disseminating the information afterwards. So those 3 key areas we hope to unite the globe or the world Parkinson's community to work together. We're not a charity. We don't raise any funds. We just amplify your messages at the Davis Phinney Foundation, the Brian Grants Foundation, to basically make this an urgent need, because it is. We're dealing with a disease that still was identified 200 years ago, and our medication that's the gold standard is over 50 years old. We have to do something. We have to become a loud and uncomfortable voice in the ears of people that can make a difference. So it's all about collaboration. Thank you for asking. One thing I want to add, Brian, you mentioned Aaron, that's my husband, and I know you both know him, but he's been telling me lately that I'm sort of losing my work-life balance. But for me, it's kind of like, well, how do you take a break from a disease that's constantly challenging you and reminding you of a community that you're sort of devoted to helping? So how do you both maintain that balance in your lives? I mean, family, I'm sure, is a big factor for both of you.
Yeah, family. I have an executive director who is so driven that, I don't want to say makes it easy for me, but she kind of lays it all out, and I take a look, and yeah, we should do this and bring it to the board, and we head to the next issue.
Right.
But when I know we have things coming up, I set my schedule. I make sure that I check my kids' schedule to make sure they don't have anything coming up. But really just communicating, being able to communicate with Katrina, who communicates with my second oldest son, Elijah.
Yeah.
And they make things a lot easier than me trying to do it, because I'll forget something, and I'll forget your name in a heartbeat. And it's not because I'm trying to do it, but it just, my memory is just not there like it used to be.
David?
I hear that, Brian. But I mean, I would say that basically the same thing is that my work-life balance is fine, because I have such a great, amazing team around me that starts actually with my wife, Connie, and then Polly Dawkins, who along with Katrina is the hardest working woman and most effective woman in Parkinson. And then this whole team that we have assembled out here at the foundation, which is like Melanie Dyson and others who are so dedicated and work so hard for our cause. And so that just allows me to basically be the visionary of the foundation. And I don't need to sit in on every meeting and whatnot. So yeah, it's
Yeah. But you sort of, it's the way most people should deal with Parkinson's, right? You need a team of support people to sort of help you live your best life. And
Yeah.
you've got that in many more ways, which is great. So my last question for you both is, you're both professional athletes. You're familiar with those pre-game talks, either by your coach or psyching yourself up or your teammates. So what would you say to someone who, like you, is sort of facing this ultimate challenge, trying to live well with Parkinson's disease? Whoever would like to start first.
I mean, I would just say that, you know, you've got this challenge ahead that's going to be years and years. And so the best thing that you can do is to become proactive on your own behalf and start looking at developing a team, as you said, son, and start thinking of ways with which you can engage yourself physically and emotionally and mentally. And if you can do those things, that you will be living long and well with Parkinson. I mean, I think that's the important point, is that it's possible to live well with this disease, and that's the takeaway. That should be the takeaway.
Thank you so much. Brian.
I'm going to give Davis the drop the mic sign. Damn, that was a good one. That was a great one. No, everything that Davis said, I mean, that's basically it in a nutshell. But I do want to, I'm thinking back to the second gala that we had, and there was a lawyer who came out with a couple buddies to attend, and we were eating dinner, and he told me his father had Parkinson's, and he gave me this description of what Parkinson's is. It's like climbing a mountain. You know, you're going to find it hard and rough, and then you'll hit a little plateau. You know, your meds and everything will be working. You'll feel good, but then you got to start climbing that mountain again until the next plateau comes, and then up in the next plateau. And I know I probably messed the story up, but it made me think, you know, with this disease, you got to have a team. Like you said, Davis, you got to put together a team. How many people? I don't know. But for me, it starts with my kids. They're my caregivers, my neurologist, my chiropractor, because a lot of times my body gets locked up and bent out of shape. And then having friends that you can call on, like you two. I mean, I've called you several times, you know, when something was going on, Sonia, and I'm glad to have Davis's information, so I have another friend to lean on. But you got to lean on those people when you truly need it, and more so than just leaning on them, you got to be there and be available for them too. It can't be a one-way street where you're giving everything and you're not receiving. So I don't know if that's what you know, we're looking at. That's what I got.
That's great, Brian.
I got confused myself on that one.
I think that what we're both ultimately talking about is having gratitude and expressing gratitude for those who are in our circle who help us.
Absolutely. Yeah. And speaking of gratitude, thank you both so much for taking the time to share your thoughts, experience, and advice with our Parkinson's community. I mean, your vision for the future is what we all desire, a world with no Parkinson's disease. But until then, a world where we can all thrive, not just survive with the challenges that this disease brings. And don't as Davis always says, forget to celebrate your daily victories.
Yeah, and we need to go arms up.
Yeah. Thank you so much.